Focus on the heavy stone table dominating the lower foreground. An old man's hand rests casually on a scattered pile of gold jewelry. His other hand pinches a tiny crystalline vial. Beside him stands a towering woman in a lavish gown, a dark mask gripped tightly in her hand. Her gaze drifts off to the right, cold, resolute, and entirely detached from the fortune she's just surrendered. John Collier's 1895 masterpiece, The Laboratory, drops you straight into the claustrophobic epicenter of premeditated murder. You are witnessing the exact moment a massacre is purchased. The canvas drips with Victorian anxiety and weaponized femininity. The historical inspiration for this scene is a real-life French aristocrat who orchestrated a ruthless campaign of mass murder. Yet, the most unsettling secret of this painting lies with the towering, cold-blooded figure herself. The person standing in Collier's studio, projecting this absolute, mature malice, was exactly 13 years old. How did a young girl, a real-life serial killer, and a dark cultural obsession collide to create one of the most controversial paintings of the 19th century? It all starts with the blueprint of a murder. John Collier designed this 62 by 48 inches canvas to trap you, operating as a precise mechanism of controlled claustrophobia. He achieved this suffocating atmosphere by establishing a dark grey ground layer on the canvas, building those oppressive shadows directly into the painting's lowest strata. The room itself is engulfed in absolute, impenetrable darkness. Notice the lighting. The only illumination comes from a burning furnace positioned completely off-frame to the left. You never actually see the fire, only its harsh, devastating effect on the subjects. With zero physical action happening in the frame, the entire psychological weight of the composition relies purely on anticipation. When The Laboratory debuted at London's New Gallery in 1895, it was the ultimate problem picture. This was a Victorian subgenre explicitly engineered to spark fierce debate and gossip by trapping characters in severe, ambiguous moral dilemmas. Collier ripped his visual narrative straight from Robert Browning's 1844 poem, The Laboratory, a wicked dissection of a would-be murderess. But here is where the fiction ends. The monster Browning conjured on the page actually walked the earth 2 centuries earlier, leaving a trail of genuine corpses in her wake. The nightmare depicted in The Laboratory traces back to a very real, very dangerous woman, Marie Madeleine d'Aubray, the Marquise de Brinvilliers. Recognized as one of history's first documented female serial killers, she orchestrated a ruthless, calculated campaign of mass murder. Born into extreme wealth, the Marquise weaponized her aristocratic standing, using it as a flawless shield to hide her staggering sociopathy and ambition. Her descent into mass murder sparked from an illicit affair with Gaudin de Sainte-Croix, an army captain with a deep, dangerous knowledge of alchemy and toxins. He supplied her with a terrifying arsenal of complex, odorless, and completely undetectable poisons. But she didn't just start eliminating her targets right away. She embarked on a methodical phase of human experimentation. To test these lethal elixirs, the Marquise walked right into the sick wards of Parisian hospitals, hiding her dark intentions behind the guise of aristocratic charitable work. There, she systematically poisoned upwards of 30 bedridden patients, just to perfect her chemical formulas. Once the toxins were flawless, she turned her sights on her own blood. She poisoned her father, watching him slowly wither away under her direct care, and then murdered 2 of her brothers to inherit their massive estates. She didn't stop there, eventually attempting to slaughter her husband, her sister, and her own daughter. Her reign of terror only ended when Sainte-Croix died accidentally, leading investigators to a locked box filled with vials of poison and incriminating letters. The French judicial system demanded a complete confession, authorizing extreme physiological destruction to get it. They subjected the Marquise to the water cure, a horrifying torture where massive quantities of water are poured directly into the stomach, inducing excruciating pain and the sensation of drowning. Pushed entirely beyond the limits of biological endurance, she finally broke and confessed. At the Place de Grève, the executioner decapitated her in a single, violent motion. Her headless corpse was thrown onto a pyre, burned to ash, and scattered into the wind. This grisly reality formed the absolute bedrock of the narrative Collier sought to capture. But to translate this scale of historical slaughter into a static image, he required a physical vessel. And to get it, he introduced an element into his studio that completely crossed the boundary of professional ethics. Look back at the woman in the painting. Newspapers reviewing the 1895 exhibition described her as an imperious beauty, driven by the darkest adult passions. She exudes an aura of mature, calculated malice, appearing fully cognizant of the lethal gravity of her actions. The historical reality of the model shatters this illusion completely. The person standing before Collier's easel was Mab Paul, born in Uttar Pradesh, India. When she posed as this psychopathic, vengeful murderess, Mab Paul was exactly 13 years old. Standing over 6 feet tall, even in her early youth, Mabel possessed a commanding physical presence that entirely masked her actual age. Collier capitalized on this, repeatedly utilizing the young girl for intensely mature, violent, and controversial subjects. Just 2 years after the laboratory, she modeled completely bare on horseback for his depiction of Lady Godiva. Later, she served as the principal model for the deeply scandalous The Prodigal Daughter in 1903. Using a young teenager to embody the darkest facets of the adult female psyche reveals the deeply problematic power dynamics operating within the Victorian art world. Collier manipulated the physical maturity of a teen to project societal fears regarding female lust, violence, and autonomy. Mabel eventually leveraged this early exposure into a professional acting career before traveling to Australia around 1910 and vanishing entirely from the historical record. Knowing that the ruthless protagonist of the laboratory is a 13-year-old engaged in elaborate role play fundamentally destabilizes your psychological connection to the painting. The cruelty in her eyes is a manufactured expression. It was coaxed out of her, masking a much deeper, more unsettling dynamic occurring directly across that table. Look closely at the space between these two figures. The entire tension of the laboratory hinges on this exact claustrophobic power dynamic. You might be focused on the woman, but it's the alchemist who actually holds the physical mechanics of death. But look at his face. There is absolutely zero moral hesitation. To him, it's just a highly profitable demonstration of his chemical mastery. He holds that tiny vial of poison just out of her immediate reach, forcing her to lean in. It's an agonizing moment of delay. Collier has trapped you in the exact second the manufacturing process ends, and the terrifying exchange of power begins. The alchemist is handing over the ultimate destructive force, and this is exactly where the painting terrified Victorian society. By the way, if you want to bring this exact nightmare into your own home, you can find a museum-quality reproduction of this masterpiece over at our store, viewcrypt.com. The link is in the pinned comment below. See you in the next one.